How have you dealt with this, especially looking back and now that you have some experience behind your belt emotionally? How are you taking that emotional journey and helping that with this next half or next quarter of this journey? You can go as far back as you want, as when you decided to make that transition from Dallas to Virginia. I mean, it had to have been, I would think, somewhat exciting, but somewhat almost like grieving, the fact that you have to do that. Tell me what that looked like.
You're spot on. We often hear like the emotional roller coaster of caregiving, but when you're on the roller coaster, it is a wild ride, right? Like I think, when we started this journey in 2014, I just like took off from the gate. It was like I don't live here. I need to fly back to Texas, but my mom needs these things. So like let me just create all these systems, put these things in place, and I'll be back in 3 weeks to figure out the next thing, right? So I just put my head down and hit the ground running initially. And so what that meant was that I just kind of pushed all the emotions down. Like I didn't give myself the space to feel sad, angry, whatever in the beginning, because it was just, okay, we've got a diagnosis and I got to go back to work, right? That was the beginning. But then as I started coming home more and then balancing working a full-time job, all the while trying to figure out what is my life as someone in my late 20s, I realized how isolating this was. And there were nights when I was battling insomnia and, crying myself to sleep because I was just like, no one else understands. I have no one to talk to. This is very dark and very hard. And I didn't realize until a few years in that what I was navigating was ambiguous grief, was this sense of like, losing pieces of who I thought I was supposed to be at 28 years old, losing pieces of who I thought my mom was supposed to be and like what our relationship was. And that, of course, continued on. When I think about the transition, a common feeling was, oh my gosh, I'm giving up so much. I'm putting my life on hold. I can't see beyond my nose right now. And so like my world is ending. It was like how it felt. And like that was a really dark time of me being 30 years old and moving back home. Like you're not supposed to, society says you're not supposed to do that, right? Like I'm supposed to be out flourishing. And so I'll never forget feeling very like depressed about my current state because again, there was a dissonance between who I thought I was supposed to be and the role that I was playing, which then led to this like feeling of anger and frustration and resentment. And like I never resented my mother,
Right.
but I resented the fact that I was, 30 years old and my life was truly caregiving. And that at the time, navigating incontinence, navigating wandering, the repeating questions like, this is not what it's supposed to be, And so it's very, very frustrating. And so, I went through this phase of getting in my car and crying, or, I would stay in my car before I walked in the house to like scream and yell or listen to music to get myself right, the anger piece I wasn't expecting. And my way of navigating that was through exercise and distancing myself. As I'm in this later stage of the roller coaster, things have slowed down. Like the speed of things has decreased. However, that doesn't mean that I still don't feel both a sense of like sadness as beginnings of like, I know I'm losing my mom. Right? Like as you get closer to death, it's like I don't know the day nor the hour, but she will not be here one day soon. And that in itself brings up so many emotions and grief of like, okay, what's next? It's a very strange place to be, but I'm also balancing that with some really strong emotions of joy and positive energy because it's like every moment I feel is a gift. Every moment is a chance to etch new memories in my brain for when my mother is no longer here. And so I feel like instead of me bolting up the roller coaster, I'm now at a point of, oh, I'm actually enjoying the end of this ride and enjoying my mom, enjoying who we are, enjoying seeing new aspects of who she is and who she's becoming, even as things are ending.
I think that it's beautiful. It's beautifully said and a beautiful journey. And to your point, there's not going to be an end as far as you're constantly learning, right? We're human beings. We're products of our experiences. Hopefully, we're constantly learning. We should be, right? And I think that's what it sounds like that you've done. And almost going back from when you first started talking about this aspect is, did you even think it was real? Like you're going in, you're doing what you're going to do. Like you said, you weren't even necessarily thinking about emotions at that point. It was just like doing the task at hand, doing what was in front of you. And I think sometimes sometimes when a loved one is diagnosed with something, chronic or a disease of some sort, it's just, you're just kind of doing it in front of you. You're not even thinking about the emotion aspect of it until then you have to. Until it hits you, then you actually have to. And and I think the first thing that we end up feeling is grief. And we all know the stages of grief that you'll go through, and it's not linear. It's not one way, right? You're going to go up and you're going to go down. You're going to go up, you're going to be angry, you're going to be sad, you're going to be depressed. It's going to be all over. You're being in denial. And I think that's one of the first things sometimes is when, okay, got it, it's a diagnosis, but she's going to be fine. Nothing's going to, it'll end up being okay, and that's somewhat of a denial. So that's that little up and down around stages of grief. But you hit a good point, because when you talk about grief, you're not just grieving your mom, you're grieving what you thought, because human beings like to be predictable. We like to think that we know what's going to happen. And it actually helps with anxiety, which is why we do that. Oftentimes we live based off of assumptions, which isn't great, but it's just the way that our minds work. But when that is disrupted, now you're like, I don't even know where to go here. Hang on a second. I'm supposed to, climb the ladder in my career. This is what I wanted to do. Maybe with their families coming up, this is happening. And all of a sudden, it just takes a hard left turn. So now you're grieving that. There's a lot that you're grieving. And I don't think people necessarily realize that. And even as we age, people grieve that I can't necessarily drive in the dark anymore. I mean, that is a form of grief.
I wish I would have known that I could grieve something that wasn't necessarily like an immediate death.
Right.
And I feel like if I had had the language of grief, at diagnosis, or even just like knew that because of just how we talk about it in life, I probably would have navigated the first 5 years of this journey very differently, I think. Because to your point, having the language of what I'm experiencing, it might not have reduced my anxiety, but it would have allowed me to know, okay, what I'm feeling is normal, or, I'm not crazy, or I'm not off by having these thoughts or feelings. And that would have been game changing for me at 26 years old.
Gosh, yeah. And it goes back to knowing the why as best as you can. And so to your point, just because you know your why doesn't mean this situation isn't going to occur. Your mom still, unfortunately, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Those are all happening. But to your point, when we kind of understand and can put words to the expression or the emotion that we're feeling, again, the why, where it's coming from, it does help to take the edge off, right? Like, okay, at least I know where it's coming from. Now, I know the why. Now I have a better, maybe a clearer opportunity to manage it in a better way. I don't want to say differently, but in a better way, in a more productive way, in a way that can lead me to the next situation that I'm going to encounter, and kind of use those same principles about, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm angry, whatever it might be. And then you can sit back for a moment. Okay, so why? Oh, it's because I'm grieving that I'm giving my life up. Whatever it might be, that I'm not going to be able to, I have to move back to Virginia. Whatever it might be in your situation, knowing that why, I think, will help take the edge off. I think that's just kind of what you alluded to around if you only knew then some of the grief.
Yeah. And I think that regardless of anyone's situations, we never want to diminish the sting of that moment, right? Like me moving back home was hard, because I was leaving my job, I was leaving my friends, I was leaving what I had created for myself. And we don't diminish that, but I do think there's this piece around, why do I feel like my life is over right now? And for me to actually say to Jessica, like, one, your life isn't over, right? But this is where those feelings are coming from. It would have actually helped turn the temperature down a little bit. It would have helped maybe clear up some of the mud that I was like wading through, because we fast forward a few months down the road and I was like, oh, this is the best thing I could have ever done for myself and my mom. But I didn't see it in the moment. So yeah, there's something about connecting to the why and where something might be coming from that helps turn the temperature down. It helps me at least get my bearings together and not be so overwhelmed by the current moment.